Welcome to the Startup to Exit podcast, where we will bring you world-class entrepreneurs and VCs to share their hard-earned success stories and secrets. This podcast has been brought to you by TIE Seattle. TIE is a global nonprofit that focuses on fostering entrepreneurship. TIE Seattle offers a range of programs, including the Go Vertical Startup Creation Weekend, TIE Entrepreneur Institute, and the TIE Seattle Angel Network. We encourage you to become a TIE member so you can gain access to these great programs. To become a member, please visit www.seattle.tie.org.
Hello, everybody. My name is Gowri Shankar. I'm here with my co-host Shirish Nadkarni, and we are on with our next edition of our podcast. I'm very excited about today's host and today's guest, But first, let me introduce my co-host. Shirish is a serial entrepreneur and a two-time author, so that makes him a serial author. His two books, From Startup to Exit and Winner Takes All, are available now for purchase wherever books are sold or wherever books are heard. We also want to thank TIE Seattle for producing this podcast, and we hope you like and subscribe in all platforms you're hearing us. We are available in all of them. Shirish, over to you.
Thank you, Gowri. Really excited about today's podcast. Today we're welcoming Joseph Sirosh, who's really an industry authority on AI. Joseph is currently CEO of CreatorsAGI Inc., an AI startup dedicated to empowering creators with artificial generative interaction capabilities. He has been an AI leader for all of his career and has served as vice president of Alexa Shopping at Amazon.com, the chief technology officer of Compass Inc., and as Microsoft's corporate vice president of AI. So as you can see, he's very well versed in AI, and we're very pleased to welcome Joseph. Welcome, Joseph.
Thank you, Shirish. Really excited to be here.
That's great. So, Joseph, as I just described, you have been an AI leader all of your career. You've also applied AI to various industries like retail and real estate. Can you talk about some of your key contributions and how you have applied AI to different industries?
Absolutely. And Shirish, before I start, I can't wait to publish an AI on your books on the CreatorsAGI platform. I feel that in the future, authentic generative interactions by creators such as yourself, writers who have incredible thoughts expressed in the past in books, but in the future through an AI, I believe that is going to be very differentiated. So that's what I'm working on. So my company, CreatorsAGI, is about building a platform for creators and authors like yourself with incredible new thoughts to use as a publishing medium. So you can actually publish your thoughts, not just in paper and the printed word, but through an AI. And more about that later. Now, over the last 30 years or so, I've been in the field of AI, so I feel somewhat senior, if you may call it that. I remember taking my first neural networks class back in 91 in UT Austin. And the professor Jaydeep Ghosh was on my thesis committee as well, and I've kept in touch. It's amazing how far it has come. And during my career, I first built neural networks for credit card fraud detection at a company in San Diego, Fair Isaac. That was the first commercialization of machine learning. This was 95. The company had gone IPO in 95. And my first job was as a machine learning scientist. And I remember putting in production a model at a Latin American bank to catch credit card fraud. And the very first day, it stopped $1 million of fraud. It was that impactful. And you had to be real time in credit card fraud detection. So that's how, in the early days, neural networks used to be. I worked in that company for about 9 years, worked on everything from search and retrieval to fraud detection and collections, joined Amazon later in 2004 December, and I was tasked with building the trust and safety platform using machine learning. And machine learning was critical because at the scale of Amazon doing fraud prevention, whether it be credit card fraud or marketplace fraud, where third-party sellers would come and sell fraudulent products. All of those had to be solved in a very scalable way, and neural networks and AI were the only way to actually make decisions on high volume transaction flows in real time. So I built out all of that from scratch, and this was one of my scale contributions during the career. And when I went back to Amazon recently, back in September 22, they affectionately called me the grandfather of machine learning at Amazon. And so sort of really kickstarted a lot of the efforts, started the machine learning conference. And then I joined Microsoft. Satya had recruited me over, and I was very passionate about AI as a platform. And I built perhaps the first machine learning as a service in the cloud on Azure. It was called Azure Machine Learning. It's launched in early 2014. And then I continued there building big data and data platforms and was a CVP of AI. Lots of products launched at that time, including many of the AI products that are in version 3, version 4, etc. now, were initiated at that time. There was a product called Azure Cognitive Search, which brought machine learning understanding to search, enterprise search, and that now is Azure AI Search. Those are all examples. And so I felt very proud of what I got started at Microsoft with the team. Obviously, the team did all of the heavy lifting there. And I then got really excited about platforms. I mean, Shirish, like you, I believe these platform flywheels, marketplaces are an amazing phenomenon. I really believe that this decade of the 20s would be dominated by platforms. And I think that is actually happening. And so I joined Compass. And Compass was a platform, a marketplace with real estate agents on one side and then buyers and sellers. And then the goal was to spin the flywheel on our platform. So all the transactions between agents and interactions between agents and buyers and sellers would go through the platform. And you would then connect in escrow and title and many of these other ecosystem players into it. So all of those happened in a platform. And during the 2018 to 2021 timeframe, the company experienced hypergrowth. We went IPO on NICE in 2021. And then after about a year, I returned back to Amazon. AI was all the rage. I ran Alexa Shopping. Alexa Shopping was now introducing AI in a significant way, the large language models. This shirt, I love LLMs, is from Amazon. And I was also leading the product and engineering for the Rufus chatbot, which Andy Jassy announced in the last earnings call, which is in beta right now. It is a chatbot for shopping on retail. So a bit of a long story, but it's been super fun in the world of AI, and it never ceases to amaze me how much it is changing.
That's great. That's an incredible journey that you've gone through. So, 2023 saw some dramatic changes in AI with the emergence of Gen AI and ChapGPT. What changed? Is generative AI somehow different?
Yeah, a great question. So I think there has been a dramatic change since the invention of Gen AI. And really, the change was seeded by transformers, the algorithm called transformers, invented in Google in 2017 by a small team of researchers. And people didn't quite realize it at the time, but that really drove a big phase transition. Now, prior to that, AI was mostly discriminative, not generative. Discriminative meaning it could help you classify things. You took an input, it allowed you to classify things intelligently. It helped you forecast a time series. You could do regression. So these were the dominant paradigms. Nobody thought AI systems could be used to generate output like in language. Nobody thought it could actually learn a model of the world that was high fidelity enough to generate images, to generate voice, to generate text that is incredibly fluent and start reasoning. And all of that really phase shifted when transformers were invented. So the difference with Gen AI is, for the first time, you have a very high quality generative system. Until now, the only generative systems of any substance were humans. You could say creatures, parrots are generative. So it was only living creatures that were generative, that could actually generate. You could you could, of course, write computer simulations that you could call generative, but it was not, of course, intelligent generative. So that's a significant difference. For the first time, you have the ability to generate output like living creatures.
Got it. So, what made this all possible? I mean, we all heard of large language models, and that large language models with smaller parameters have existed for some time. So, what is the, you talked about transformers being a breakthrough technology. So, maybe you can talk a little bit more about that and how that transformation happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy to. So, in the past, large language models were simple statistical models. It said, hey, let's say you say 3 words, then what comes next? You can calculate a probability using standard probability calculations. And it just wouldn't do very well, because a word is dependent upon so much of the context on the language before it and world knowledge. Now, just to take an example, if I tell an LLM of today, how do you say banana in Spanish? Well, it has to answer with the word platana, which is the Spanish word. But to do that answer, you've got to, first of all, understand all of Spanish, all of English to translate. And then you have to understand that whole sentence is a question. How do you say banana in Spanish? And the right answer is Spanish. So the amount of learning that is required, the context that is required, is so massive. And there was no way a neural network in the past could learn Spanish, English, understand how to reason about that question, and generate that one word Spanish answer. So when transformers were invented, first of all, there were 2 things that happened. One, it created an algorithm that you would dynamically pay attention to different parts of the text depending upon the sequence of words, and therefore know which of the context was most relevant to predicting the next word. So that was one invention. The second was, the algorithm itself turned out to be so incredibly parallel and scalable that you could run it on these GPUs and these very large clusters of GPUs and scale it up as much as you wanted. So you could now have a neural network which had the capacity, the actual capacity to learn a world model, the capacity to learn Spanish and English and all other languages now. Now, OpenAI or Anthropic, I mean, they cover all the major languages. And it now had the ability, now you had a system that was scalable enough that just by throwing compute at it, now you could digest all of the world's online text. And in OpenAI, one of the scientists there had that gumption, so to speak, right? That thing that, hey, how about we actually go take on this task of taking all of the world's online text and just feed it through the transformer algorithm to predict the next word, right? So the problem was this predict the next word problem that they went after. A lot of others, by the way, even in Google, they had this BERT algorithm that come about at the same time. They didn't go after the predict the next word problem. They said, given a sentence, let us try and model a missing word. It was called a masked language modeling. If a word was in the middle, you mask it, and from all the other words, try to predict that. Now, those algorithms were very good at modeling language and representing it, but it didn't actually quite have this ability to learn world models by predicting something. So that was a very interesting big step as well. So transformer algorithm gets invented in Google. It's very scalable. People start applying it, and first to translation, and then in OpenAI, the GPT model, generative pre-trained transformer model that predicts the next word, gets developed, and they just go after all of the world's online text. And then when they start generating text with that, it just sounds so real, and people are just amazed internally, right? And so they then went on to develop GPT-2. And when GPT-2 was launched is when people really started waking up and thinking, wow, this next word prediction problem from online data, this has really got something going on that we didn't anticipate. They called it emergent behavior. Okay, it was just not a single word prediction issue, but just by forcing a neural network to predict the next word, it was now forced to learn everything that you needed to learn, very sophisticated concepts. And that was just a mind blowing thing, which is why, LLMs in many ways are not an invention, they are a discovery. What do I mean by that, right? So when Galileo invented the telescope and looked out into space, he discovered Jupiter and the moons of Jupiter. Okay. Moons of Jupiter were not created by human beings. We just discovered them, discovered a phenomenon. And that the same thing happened when Edwin Hubble discovered galaxies. In the same way, what just happened was the transformer is sort of the telescope. You invented the algorithm, and suddenly you discover this incredible universe that just opened up of emergent behavior, ability to reason, ability to complete text, ability to now generate images and understand images and any input right now. And so that is the magic of Gen AI today, which is now you have a universal algorithm that's capable, apparently, of learning at scale, learning anything you throw at it. Now people are even talking about the online data may not be enough. We may run into the wall of not enough new data. So it can learn anything, and then it can generate anything practically. It can generate voice, audio, music, images, text, DNA sequences, materials, potentially even engineering structures, new algorithms. I mean, who knows?
So you talked about GPT-2 and prior generations of GPT, but it's only through when GPT 3.5 and 4.0 came out that you really saw this, the world shift, and suddenly you had the ability to create ChatGPT, which would generate realistic responses to any questions you asked. So, what
Correct.
changed between GPT-2 and GPT 3.5 and 4 that allowed it to be so much better?
Yeah, great question, right? So in GPT-3 was a big step change as well because it went after dramatically larger data sets than GPT-2. So it really started performing well. Was eye-opening. I remember, that coming out in 2020 and getting super excited about it. So at that time, people also understood that large language models really just modeled all of the data online, and it didn't have alignment with what we liked. So if you told GPT-3 at that time without alignment to generate a recipe for a poisonous chemical, it would do that. I told it, help me commit suicide, it would tell you that. How do I build a bomb? It would tell you that. It could do all of those things. And people realized, by the way, that you needed to take these models and align it with what we as humans want. So this is like a kid being born, and the kid is rowdy if you ask it to be rowdy and does all sorts of things, and you now have to shape its character so the kid grows up to be a good citizen in the real world. And so they came up with this algorithm called RLHF, reinforcement learning from human feedback, which really uh, uh, was driven by a lot of humans creating course material, if you want to think about it, like questions, answers, how to respond, and then using that to really teach the algorithm on how to answer, how to respond to people, and how to have dialogue. And now the models GPT 3.5 and later are aligned. So they're aligned to human preferences. It knows how to talk to human beings and what to say and what not to say. And after building that, they OpenAI released ChatGPT. And when ChatGPT first came out, that was the first application that really exposed the magic of GPT 3.5 to everybody. Now, many of the researchers and scientists knew about it, and we were building applications with it. But until that ChatGPT hit the ground, nobody realized how vast the scope of this generative AI was, all the tasks to which it could be applied. And that then hockey sticked it. And then GPT-4 came out, which was a dramatically larger model. Many people think it is not just one model, but a collection of about 8 different models, all put together, called a mixture of experts, and each model having slightly different specialization, and its quality is amazingly good. So that's what's so different about the current generation GPT-3, GPT-4, and they are all very well aligned, so they don't hallucinate as much, meaning they don't just make up things. In the past, many of these AI models seem to make up things. GPT-4 is grounded, and they don't seem to make up. Although you can still get it to make up things, you have to force it, but it behaves well.
Mhm. Right. So it's interesting that the transformer model algorithms were invented at Google, but it was OpenAI that made the dramatic improvement. So I'm wondering why is OpenAI GPT-4 so much better, and what about Claude 3 from Anthropic?
Yeah. OpenAI hired some incredible researchers. I think if you look at its founding, it was Elon Musk, by the way, who founded it and recruited the core team of Ilya and Greg Brockman, and Sam Altman joined as well as a co-founder. And Ilya is one of the pioneers of large neural network models. And they had a really good team, and they had this bold ambition to go after artificial generative intelligence, artificial general intelligence. And we'll talk about that more. But that, and they believed that scale was the key. And they had a conviction that more capacity on a simple algorithm and more data would yield more intelligence. And they pursued that relentlessly in a way that many other researchers didn't. And that really made the fundamental difference. And now it is almost common parlance. Everybody accepts that the capacity of the LLM is one of the most important things to drive more intelligent behavior. But at that time, that wasn't obvious.
Right. And are there other models like Slot 3 that are approaching the performance of GPT-4?
Yes, the founder of Cloud or Anthropic is from OpenAI. He was one of that core team that built the GPT, and they've amassed a really good team of 30 scientists with physics backgrounds, etc., to build these LLMs. And the latest release from them, Claude 3, is very close to GPT-4. In some cases, it is better. There is an IQ test I saw online that now people are administering to LLMs, believe it or not. And Claude 3 had an IQ of 110, I believe, whereas GPT-4 had an IQ just below 100, right? Somewhere 80 to 100 range. So that just a tongue-in-cheek demo, but it is catching up.
Great. So let me now turn it over to Gowri to continue the discussion on Gen AI and LLMs.
Yeah. Thanks, Shirish. So let's shift this conversation a bit, Joseph, right? So you talked about the evolution, right? Both personally for you and now what the inventors have discovered, like you put it, right? So uh, it seems like on the business side, it's just the large players actually can attack and solve it for now. Maybe others will come in, and I want to figure out how you fit in. But the opening salvo was hit by the really large players who have a lot of money. But the key the key ingredient that I want to explore with you on is NVIDIA, because they made an early bet in their GPU and they pulled along. And as of the most recent reporting, they are the fourth most valuable company on the planet, right? Shifting at about or coming in at about 2 trillion. How did NVIDIA change this growth uh, for all the inventors who could build on top of NVIDIA when they figured out scale was the only way to go? When they made that bet, they needed GPU or they needed compute. And along came NVIDIA, or they dragged NVIDIA along. Can you explore that history and the tech of NVIDIA a little
Yeah.
bit?
There is a really good question of
Yeah.
what came first, the chicken or the egg. And let me tell you a little bit of history. NVIDIA made its bet on neural networks very early on in the 2010 timeframe, even 2012. So the very first neural network, large, deep neural network model that beat um, the CVPR competition on image
Mm-hmm.
classification, that was built on NVIDIA GPUs. So that was 2012, I believe. The paper came out. I don't remember exactly when the competition was. So in the late 2007 2008 timeframe onward, there were efforts by researchers to use the capacity of GPUs to do parallel computing, a lot of parallel computing. And three independent researchers in neural networks field, they in almost in simultaneously in parallel, started using GPUs to learn neural networks. And then there was this incredible eye-opening demo in the early 2010 to 2012 timeframe of image classification, which really changed the trajectory of computer vision. NVIDIA then took that game on, and it really credit to Jensen. Jensen has been a very visionary leader, and he pushed NVIDIA into cutting edge areas constantly. And then he cultivated a relationship with OpenAI as well. And through the ensuing years, from 2012 onwards, Jensen was relentlessly pushing GPUs and parallel computing in HPC scenarios, in supercomputing, in ray tracing at scale, and of course, neural networks and machine learning. And that then hockey sticked when GPT models were trained. Google, of course, had bet on NVIDIA chips quite a bit, and then they decided that uh, those type of architectures were essential, and they built their own called the TPU. Uh, and then when OpenAI really built GPT models, then Microsoft also came along and built very large GPU clusters to train these models. They provided support, and all of this flywheel started going. And now NVIDIA is a king of the hill, absolutely king of the hill when it comes to training neural networks. Training is the specific time thing where you have to hold the entire neural network in memory. You have to pass enormous amounts of data through it. And when you look at the flops per unit of power, I think NVIDIA has an incredible edge compared to any architecture that exists right now.
Got it. So, then that leads to two-part question, right? Of course, there were other chip players who could have pushed along. Um, they did, or they didn't do it fast enough on the one side. But on the other side, Google and Amazon and Meta had as much insight into it, I would argue, much more than Microsoft because of what they did, right? Microsoft is if we classify them as the enterprise software company, largely what they are, compared to, say, an Amazon or a Meta or a Google, which every day interacts with just the average person. How did Microsoft OpenAI combination along with NVIDIA work versus any other three players could have worked? I mean, they could have all picked. What led Microsoft to make the bet? Because you were leading it. So in essence, you were making the bet on their
Yeah.
behalf uh, compared to anybody else.
This is where
Mm-hmm,
individuals matter a
mm-hmm,
lot. You know, Satya's very first tweet, if you go back in Twitter history in 2009, was machine learning
mm-hmm,
exclamation, right? And then he was a big fan of AI and machine learning for a
mm-hmm,
very long time. So when he hired me, that passion was very evident. And Jensen really was very early to realize that deep neural networks were potentially a very
mm-hmm,
important workload. And Elon Musk was very early to realize that open source AI or open in AI was going to be very important because he was worried about Google's
mm-hmm,
incredible advantage in
mm-hmm,
AI internally in research. Uh, and then Elon Musk and Satya happened to meet at a conference. And by the way, Elon Musk had actually, when I was there itself, really asked for enormous amount of capacity in Azure cloud for GPUs so that OpenAI could do its work. And Satya was very eager to support. And then later, Sam Altman and Satya met at a conference, and they kicked off the partnership. And Kevin Scott, the CTO of Microsoft, had a big role to play in that as well, in facilitating that relationship to come together. And so you see this incredible dynamic of certain very enlightened individuals steering it, and um, they kick things off. And inside of OpenAI, Ilya, the scientist, was very responsible for leading the charge into very large scale models. Amode, the current CEO of Anthropic, was part of Ilya's team, who actually got the GPT models along with a couple of other scientists. And so you see the incredible transformative power of certain individuals taking certain bets, visionary bets earlier, and those bets paying off. Now, of course, we don't see all the people who took visionary bets and
mm-hmm,
didn't survive, right?
mm-hmm,
But these survived. And so there's a bit of a survival
mm-hmm,
bias here, I'm sure. But these folks are, responsible for it
mm-hmm,
going the way it did. Now, a couple of more other things. Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, also in 2016 realized that AI was a very important thing to
mm-hmm,
take a bet on. He went to the Neural Information Processing Systems Conference, the leading research conference in machine learning at the time, and appeared at the workshop and started pitching why Facebook is the best place for researchers
mm-hmm,
to come together. And he started the FAIR Labs, the Facebook AI Research Labs in New York, headed by Jan LeCun, who's now a Turing Award winner. Now, Google, in the meantime, had hired another of the leading lights, Jeffrey Hinton, who's another Turing Award winner also for AI. And Jeffrey Hinton and Ilya had worked together. So Google had that strength internally. Ilya had left Google to join OpenAI, but Jeffrey Hinton remained. So these individuals really drove the thought leadership. And now what you're seeing is the flywheel effect of those bets that were taken early on.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But looks like NVIDIA um, um, went with OpenAI first, and now they're doing it with everybody. But the fact is, they believed in the model so much because they had the lead in their thinking with their visionary CEO to say, this is where the world is going to go. Sure, they succeeded, but the fact is, if you look back 10 years, I bet the market cap of NVIDIA was the market cap. NVIDIA moved much after their earnings in one day that their entire market cap in the history wasn't that much. So looks like
Correct.
they played a role every day along with all these individuals because many bets have been played, but very few have succeeded. You know.
Yeah, and that's true. Remember, NVIDIA as a hardware player
Mm-hmm,
had low margins, and they were very
mm-hmm,
volatile as well because when Bitcoin was taking off, people were buying GPUs
mm-hmm,
for Bitcoin, and then it
mm-hmm,
started going down, and then the GPU market was not doing well. So if you look at the hardware makers' life, because they don't
mm-hmm,
have SaaS models, right? They've got to sell a
mm-hmm,
card every time. It's
mm-hmm,
Groundhog Day every time. There's an enormous amount of volatility in the electronics market, which is why consumer electronics companies
mm-hmm,
don't survive very well, right? Very hard. It's so. Jensen was very oriented towards
Mm-hmm.
finding the next market all
Mm-hmm.
the time. And they now saw the
Mm-hmm.
demand from OpenAI, and so ramped up
Mm-hmm.
the capacity, etc., and
Mm-hmm.
started making bets. And those ended up
Mm-hmm.
aligning and paying off. Yeah, so, but, kudos to Jensen. And so he's actually the longest serving
Mm-hmm.
tech
Yep.
CEO, I
And
believe. He started the
yep.
company in 93. And so is now
30 years. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
30 years into it. And so he was able to have the long
Mm-hmm.
term thinking and take bets to create an outcome as opposed to be just playing the market
Let
short
me
term.
shift. Yeah,
So kudos
absolutely.
to them.
Let me
Yeah.
shift to another hardware player that we should all be talking about is Apple. I mean, there's 2 billion plus devices out there, right? And they are the interface for the world. Um, I'm sure they are working on it. We don't hear much. And like every Apple thing, you don't hear till they say, hey, by the way, here's another thing. But they've had this very close relationship with Google. And I'm sure they could develop such a relationship with uh, with Microsoft also. But Google is also has their own hardware, etc. It's not anymore just hey, I can power maps on Apple devices on iPhone. It's a lot more tricky. Where, in your opinion, is Apple? And because you came from Alexa most recently, and Apple has their version of they have Siri. So where do you see them going in this Gen AI path?
I think Apple will nail edge
Mm-hmm.
inference. So on the phone, the biggest opportunity is to run the
Mm-hmm.
models, not to train the models, to run the models. Already there are very large neural network models on the phone for
Mm-hmm.
photo processing, and they clean up the images we take without us even knowing that's happening. So I think Apple has this incredible opportunity to go run LLMs, or at that point they might be SLMs,
Mm-hmm.
small language models, but optimized for the
Mm-hmm.
applications. And I think they are deliberately working towards making that happen because they have this incredible platform
Mm-hmm.
called iPhone, and its compute capacity. The iPhone's compute
Mm-hmm.
capacity is just massive compared to anything that we are aware of. So I think that's possible. I think we will probably see the inference at the edge being exposed as a platform to
Mm-hmm.
developers, app developers. That's what I would
Mm-hmm.
do if I were them. Certainly, Siri
Mm-hmm.
would improve. And Siri has been, as all of you know, an
Mm-hmm.
unfortunate disappointment
Mm-hmm.
for a long period of time. And not just Siri, Google Assistant also. And a part of the reason is it really does take a large language model to be able to
Mm-hmm.
do these things well. And large language models are large, so they have to be hosted on the cloud and rendered through an API. But then you can run it on the phone at the real time speed you need. I think those things are actually improving. So I wouldn't be surprised if Apple announced an LLM based approach to Siri in the upcoming WWDC. I think they could launch a few capabilities for Gen AI for developers. I think they will probably have a new chip, a new AI chip for inferencing on the edge. And I think from then on, I think it's their game. I think these chips can be used for edge processing, potentially down the line, even in an
Sure.
Apple Watch. So it would be very
Sure.
interesting to see
We
what
shift
happens.
to a quick another area which is of big interest to everybody is AI and enterprises, right? Everybody in enterprises allocating budgets or at least allocating resources in one of these two. But eventually, they have to play with the large LLMs. No enterprise can, at the moment, can invest as much as OpenAI and catch up soon. Maybe they could banking and others could. But with your time in Compass, and when that was one of the opportunities that you might have seen of applying AI into probably, if you take one, two, and three, defense, healthcare, then real estate as the top three spends of United States, how do you see enterprises applying AI, uh, given the state of what AI is now, to where they need to go to justify to their own boards the investment versus returns?
Yeah, fantastic question. Let's break that problem down a little bit
Mm-hmm.
into use cases and how it can be used. So Gen AI as it stands today is great for interactive communication with clients, with customers, with patients, all of the code generation and so on, right? So I actually think where you have those types of opportunities, you'll see adoption first. Now, Klarna recently announced they had replaced 700 customer service
Mm-hmm.
representatives or so with Gen AI and
Mm-hmm.
OpenAI based model. That I think is just a tip of the iceberg of
Mm-hmm.
what is possible. I think these models have turned out to be much more effective at communication, and there are papers that show the output of ChatGPT or GPT-4 is
Mm-hmm.
more empathetic than the way
Mm-hmm.
doctors communicate. So when a doctor communicates to a patient, some doctors can be rather short, not very communicative, may not be as empathetic, whereas a large language model can smooth all that over. So in healthcare, there's an enormous opportunity where patient communication is involved, doctors writing notes are involved. Doctors have a huge burden of notes and managing medical information. AI is actually turned out in some examples to be very good at diagnosis because it integrates enormous amount of information and much more than any human doctor can hold in their head. And it can potentially reduce errors of all types in diagnosis through that. So those are all examples of applications in healthcare. In cybersecurity, it's actually helping in threat detection and threat management and mining logs. When you have very large number of log entries happening, how do you identify that? I think, of course, coding, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more later, in every type of coding, whether it be user interfaces, backend coding, diagnosis of errors, uh, log mining, all of those, data science, all of those is being transformed by AI. And of course, in defense, everything that we can imagine in terms of drones or automated control of various types are all going to be affected by this revolution
Mm-hmm.
in AI as well.
So that sort of leads me to this question, right? The governments world over are um, somewhere between concerned, paranoid, and scared, right? Some combination of them. And you, at your time at both Microsoft and Amazon, you dealt with a lot of world leaders, big and small, doesn't matter. And they all have the same level of paranoia. On the one hand, they're worried what's going to happen to their own citizens because they could be replaced. Like Karna said, hey, I've replaced 700 people at just flip of a switch because it takes a while to replace them. While on the other hand, they're worried about defense and are we being threatened and taken over, etc. Right? How does governments react or even interact with AI, which is moving at a pace that has never been seen in the history of humans. Because this is the first technology that was democratized on the day the light switch went on. It's not like, hey, we had an iPhone 2007. Okay, by the time, say, India got it was 2020. No, India got it on the same day you and I could write a poem on ChatGPT. I don't mean to pick an idea. You know what I mean. So the governments play a very important role, and are they worried beyond anything? Are they running scared, or what's your take on it?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think governments are caught
Mm-hmm.
unawares. The one technology I can think of similar
Mm-hmm.
is the internet, and there was a lot of thinking in the earlier days of the internet and World Wide Web. How would governments own control over the internet, or how would they, uh, manage internet in their country when the technology is
Mm-hmm.
invented somewhere else and it is actually dominated by other countries? And I think that becomes a really pronounced issue now with large language models, in that they have to
Mm-hmm.
run on a cloud, and they're not open source software. They're not things that you just download and use, and training it is very hard. Most countries don't have the ability to
Mm-hmm.
train large language models. And so also it is now
Mm-hmm.
dominated by English, and a few companies in the world now completely dominate
Mm-hmm.
large language models, right? That's Microsoft, OpenAI, Google, Facebook. I mean, these are all companies. By the way, if you think about it as a country outside of the US, some set of companies in Silicon Valley, I mean,
Yep.
completely dominate some of the most important
Mm-hmm.
technologies of
Mm-hmm.
the next 10 years. And I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
real concern. So countries are investing in it, and Jensen is happy to sell them
Mm-hmm.
GPUs and encourage
Mm-hmm.
sovereign AI. I think the lack of specialized talent is a big challenge, in that not everybody can build a very large
Mm-hmm.
language model, because there is a lot of
Mm-hmm.
intricacy to that. Yes, so I think that's where we are. I think there are concern. I think interestingly, I see people being very opportunistic in the Gulf countries, UAE, etc., are now leading efforts to create data centers right next to oil fields with very cheap energy. So you can actually pipe intelligence out instead of
Mm-hmm.
piping oil out. And it's a
Mm-hmm.
really
Mm-hmm.
interesting thing, right? Like, if you think, there's actually a really interesting analogy here. Until now, the primary uh, currency of civilization
Mm-hmm.
was energy, and with
Mm-hmm.
almost no cap. Essentially, you could say, into a civilization, pour more cheap energy, and
Mm-hmm.
the economy will move. Okay, and there's almost as though it's almost as though humans can use as much energy
Mm-hmm.
as you give to them. Of course, there's the economic capacity. There's never been anything like that since the time of energy. Okay. So if you were to create more CPUs, I'm just taking examples as a technology. I mean, only so many CPUs the
Mm-hmm.
world needs and world can take. But the world can take unlimited energy, right? But like, we're getting to the point where the world can actually take
Mm-hmm.
unlimited intelligence. I mean, like, anybody can get more intelligence, meaning, equal, like ChatGPT, or you can use it for every single thing. It can be healthcare, it can be science, it can be engineering, art, movies, music. So there's this new technology where intelligence becomes
Mm-hmm.
like energy, in that it's a commodity that can be now, built, piped, and consumed. And so some of that is
Mm-hmm.
now happening with countries with oil resources or cheap energy, taking this bet to fund massive data centers that are now powered by cheap energy. Instead of taking oil out of the ground, refining it into all sorts of things, shipping it all over the world, and these, moving atoms. Now they move oil atoms or molecules out of the ground, convert them to electrons in a data center that represent intelligence, and pipe it out through the internet.
That's probably the first time I've heard how atoms move to electrons in a very different fashion than in my earlier physics lesson.
Yeah. And electrons that are now
Yeah.
much more useful than atoms and molecules,
Yeah.
and immediately
So
usable. Yeah. So I think it's a very different type of economy that we are looking at in the
yeah.
next 2 decades.
You started to build on that. You started your this interview with using a very interesting phrase, authentic, uh, you know, generative
Generative intelligence,
interaction.
generative
So
interaction,
AGI,
actually.
but
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
play on it.
Yeah.
So let's sort of dig into that, right? Because uh, the reason the governments are worried is that the intelligence that this model has can be exploited by a few to gain enormous, ability to change the way the world thinks, etc., and so on and so forth. But you have now taken on the responsibility to say, hey, this actually can be harnessed for an authentic interaction. How did you come up with it? And then elaborate on what led to the startup from that little thread of idea that you had.
Yeah, great question. I felt that generative AI is going to create so much commoditization of what is seen as human creativity in new images. You can't sometimes in that first glance tell whether an article is written by AI or a human. And at that point, I felt that the creator actually matters. So people will start really trusting the author they like, whose wisdom they have read before. And a human being standing behind the AI comes across as more authentic, even if they use AI, because they are now standing behind it and are providing this trust factor, which is even if the AI is generating something, that's something that I approve. And if it is not generating the right thing, I'm going to curate it. And so you can trust in the output that you're getting from my AI, right? I felt that was really important. I felt that the humans are more differentiated in the world of highly democratized AI generation. So I wanted to make that happen. And so that generative interactions are going to be the currency of the future, by the way, meaning like everything that we do on a computer is going to have AI in the middle. So the interactions you're having, right? All the conversations are going to be mediated by AI in one way or the other. And so now AI becomes, in my mind, a new format, just like video became a format, right? Streaming video created YouTube, and people now created YouTube videos, which are designed for YouTube, very, very different from
Mm-hmm.
movie making in the past. And so now that AI becomes a format, I believe now creators have the opportunity to create outputs that take advantage of all this power of Gen AI. So it can now extrapolate the creator's thoughts in a way that the creator likes and is blessed. The creator can themselves expand their horizons. I was speaking to yesterday to a very prolific Substack author who said Gen AI has really 100x his productivity because not only he goes for a walk in the morning or run in the morning. He has 4 ideas at that time. He speaks them out aloud, and it gets captured, translated by an AI into notes, and then he takes those notes and puts that into ChatGPT and asks it to brainstorm and expand on those ideas, and he just gets so much creative expansion of his thought that he can now be extremely productive. How do you bring all of that power on a platform? How do you platformize that? That was really my thinking. So bring, first of all, authenticity of the creator, allow the creator to create new universes powered by AI, and then communicate in an effective way where the audience now gets 24 by 7 ability to interact with the author's thoughts and representations and feels that sense of authenticity and in any language, right? And that's what I ended up imagining, and hopefully we'll launch in the small number of months in front of us.
So, of all the ideas that you could have pursued, Joseph, in Gen AI, right, you picked this one because you must have felt a sense of commitment and mission to this idea, knowing fully well that you're taking on your previous employers who could essentially do something like this if they choose to, because they have, for the sake of the discussion, they have unlimited resources, as you mentioned. Why this mission, and why did you say that I got to start with creators? You could have started with many others. You could have started with GitHub developers, right? So, I mean, developers who are on GitHub, but you picked very specific mission
Yeah.
with a very specific value proposition, and what led to that specifically. You could have done anything when you left. Yeah.
It's a great question. It was that sense of mission and purpose in that I believe the human imagination is incredibly powerful. Now, certainly software developers are imagining things. So, and now it feels like a well-served market. But I feel that authors, writers, and scientists, and I'll be happy to serve them at the right time when the platform is mature, the people who have original thoughts, I think amplifying them is one of the most important missions that we can go after. This is not about ads. This is not about just generic TikTok like entertainment. I'm really going after people who have original thoughts and people who curate original thoughts and who shape the very fabric of our civilization. And I think that matters. And let me
Mm-hmm.
allow me to expand on it a little bit. The famous author
Mm-hmm.
Yuval Noah Harari talks about how stories are the
Mm-hmm.
foundation of our civilization completely. Everything that we believe in, we operate in, our legal system is a story, um, religion is a story. Everything that we believe, the founding principles of the country, the constitution, every single thing is a story. We created it. We human beings came up with a story to live by. And those stories are these original thoughts that define civilization itself. And the humans who come up with those original thoughts, I think they can be amplified by AI like no other. And those thoughts matter. And those thoughts can be not just amplified in terms of the production, but communicated to people who want to get that original thinking in very powerful ways with AI. And I felt that was just an amazing mission. It is like the early mission of Google to
Mm-hmm.
organize the world's knowledge. At that time, maybe people didn't fully understand how deep
Mm-hmm.
that can actually be. And I felt a sense of purpose with this mission, and I felt there is tremendous depth in this mission. And I think tremendous room for innovation in that mission. And so I felt really, really compelled to go pursue that. And although it's not obvious in day one that there is a business model that is, easy or anything around it, right? The enterprise business models at Microsoft and Amazon are very easy to understand, and there's a way to grok. But I'm not going after making a quick business come together, but but I'm going after creating a specific direction of innovation that I think is very
Got it.
worth pursuing.
So the tool sets that you will initially come out with for the creators, etc., right? Similar tool sets are being created by others. So like there's a GitHub Copilot or a Bing Copilot. Maybe it's branded differently, but they've all had mixed reviews. What is it that you could share with our audience that you could see coming out with that will elevate you or differentiate you from all the others? Because the reference point right now is Copilot, right? For good or bad, it is what it is. But now there's a ton of other tools, especially in image creation, etc. There's lots of tools. Where do you see fitting into that schema, so to speak?
Yeah, great question. And I'll tease a
Yeah.
few things,
Mm-hmm.
although I can't share a lot, right? I think perhaps the best analogy in my version 1.0
Mm-hmm.
is to GPT store in ChatGPT. So in a GPT store, anyone who wants to
Mm-hmm.
create a GPT can come in and upload some content and
Mm-hmm.
create a GPT that has a
Mm-hmm.
specific kind of behavior, and you use it within ChatGPT, right? And it has some knowledge that you can
Mm-hmm.
attach and so on. So imagine that concept, but then you platformize it so that any author, uh, for example, Shirish, could come in and upload his blogs and his books and his writings and his wisdom into that platform, and then generate an AI
Mm-hmm.
in his image, so to speak, right? Which represents
Mm-hmm.
him and his thinking
Mm-hmm.
as closely as possible. And it feels authentic to what Shirish would write, authentic to his originality. And people would, through the interaction, feel that sense from Shirish, as opposed to going to ChatGPT and getting a generic outcome. You go to a Copilot, you get a generic outcome. And what LLMs do, Gowri, is they average across everything they pre-trained on. See, they're trained on the world's knowledge, and there may be 1,000 experts in any particular field. It sort of averages all of that together and generates an output. Whereas here, the outcome is a specific sharp point of view. And Shirish, to take an example, may disagree with
Right.
what ChatGPT generates. He would say that is not how marketplaces work, for example. Okay, and he'd say the most important things, in his opinion, are X, Y, and Z, and the AI should express X, Y, and Z, not the generic answer from ChatGPT, right? It's not the world understood answer from ChatGPT. I think that matters, right? Every creator, every original thinker, originality is different from the average. That's how original thinkers stand out. It's not everybody's known wisdom averaged together, but they are thinking different. And so this is a part of the authentic generative interaction, which is the ability to think different, but an AI to represent something different and authentic to that creator that they want to communicate. And that, by the way, is not indexed at all today in any Copilot. No Copilot, no ChatGPT, nobody says that their goal is to enable someone to be different. Their goal actually is perhaps opposite. Their goal is to be aligned, okay? Meaning aligned with what human preferences are, what people would like to hear, not different.
So does this open up opportunities, say, for enterprises? Let's say they have an earnings call. They publish a ton of um, performance indicators in form of, either government mandated or their own everyday releases to the audience, right? Other than the few who are very interested in, say, that enterprise's performance, in this case, their earnings, the rest just kind of listen to it and move on. Now, are you seeing that the narrative, in this case, Shirish, or in another case, an enterprise, or in another case, let's say, a doctor, could be authentic about their narrative or what they intended, as opposed to the LLM saying this is the most likely intention of the author?
Yeah, very good question. I think there are innumerable use cases like that. So this is why I said AI is a format. Okay. So today, investor relations on public companies use PDF as the format. And it's a static presentation and a static set of numbers you can browse through. Now, what if instead of PDF as a format, you put out an AI that is actually very curated by that company? So it answers the investor questions in a very accessible way. And where they don't want to answer, it's politely declines, right? And politely steers away from the type of questions that they are not prepared to answer also, which are legitimate use cases, right? And so this is again the thing that I want to accomplish is an authentic AI that the creator feels represents them authentically. The creator can be a company. The creator can be the marketing department of a company. The creator can be an author, a movie. It can be a doctor. In fact, I have a small pilot with a doctor in process right now, and it's a very, very interesting use case. And remember, this thing about being authentic means it being allowing yourself to be different from what an LLM produces. And I think I've not heard anyone say that yet.
I would completely agree. I don't think authentic. I mean, Gen AI has conjured up the idea that it is the least authentic. Whether it's right or wrong, it's given that. So
it's the least authentic.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
It allows you to dream, right? I mean, it hallucinates and dream. I mean, somebody was saying that all outputs of LLMs are hallucinations.
Very well said. Very well said. So this sort of leads to this question, right? Everybody is fearful that AI is going to eat their jobs for breakfast. then what do we do for the rest of the day for our livelihood? You have spent enormous amounts of time in your career, uh, you know, in large companies where optimization of jobs or optimization of productivity has been a core of their existence. And do you see this as a real thing that people have to worry about? Do people say, I don't want to be a developer, I can just get Gen AI to write the code? Or how does the fear of every new technology has this fear, right? I'm sure when the wheel came about, people worried about it, and the car came about, people worried about so on and so forth. You can trace it all the way back. How do you, as the leader who has spent that kind of time you have spent, uh, go out and tell the public, no, this will actually make your lives better, not just take your job? I'm sure there's some jobs that are going to be lost, but that aside.
I think no technology has been democratized as
Mm-hmm,
fast as AI also. So
mm-hmm,
ChatGPT is a great example. I think I find that
mm-hmm,
people who are not very tech savvy are actually some of
mm-hmm,
the deeper adopters
mm-hmm,
of ChatGPT. Small
mm-hmm,
businesses, people who feel constrained, people who feel they can't afford certain services, and so many things, right? So I do think that there is an incredible democratization happening of intelligence, democratization of intelligence, and access to it. And that I think is very,
mm-hmm,
very positive in the short term. Now, it causes displacement, right?
mm-hmm,
Displacement doesn't mean elimination of jobs.
mm-hmm,
It just changes everything, right? So everybody now ends up being forced to adapt very, very quickly. Now, we went through this with the internet era at some point. This is just
mm-hmm,
happening at an
mm-hmm.
accelerated pace. It's 10x faster than internet. So I think I would essentially say everyone who wants to be
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurial and
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneur in the broader
Mm-hmm.
sense, not about starting companies, just people who have this curiosity, the ability to engage with new technology and use it and all of that. I think they're going to be so much more productive, and they're going to
Mm-hmm.
really amplify the economy. I think in the next 5 years, we will see an expansion of the pie in incredibly powerful ways that I think will lift all the boats. And then after that, it will be about how we deal with the
Mm-hmm.
displacement and changes that are happening as a
Mm-hmm.
civilization and as a society. So what happens in the world is when
Mm-hmm.
lots of people feel just anxious, it leads to political change, unfortunately, populism, all kinds of things. I think like this is going to be some of the biggest challenges the world will have to confront, because a very, very large number of people will just feel uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
because of the change. There was a book I remember reading in my teenage years by Alvin Toffler called Future Shock. And this is future shock happening in spades, especially in the next 5 years. And so that is the more disruptive outcome, and it's less the
I haven't
technology.
had anybody recall Alvin Toffler. Just puts me in an age category that makes me feel a little old.
That
But
is right.
democratizing intelligence, that I think is our headline for this podcast. Joseph, thank you very very much for this very insightful interview. And I think we may have to have you back at the end of the year so that we capture everything you said and then go back and say, Where do you think this is going?" And then and hopefully when you launch, you would come back on our podcast and announce the launch on our podcast. So look forward to it. Thank you very much, Joseph, for this great hour we spent together. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you, Gowri. It's been a
Joseph. This
pleasure.
was an amazing session and look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you for listening to our podcast from Startup to Exit, brought to you by TI Seattle. Assisting in production today are Eesha, Jain, and Minee Verma. Please subscribe to our podcast and rate our podcast wherever you listen to them. Hope you enjoyed it.